Hello, everybody. How was the weekend? Let me get it. Okay.
Hello there. Hi, Chris.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Good. Excellent work, guys. Whoever is posting our groups. I mean, like, there's a lot of very cool stuff going on already. But you know what? Don't be too happy right now because now is when things start falling apart. So don't be too excited. So today we're going to be talking about detail, surface detail.
Chris,
Hello.
what were you doing this last weekend? You seems painting something, right?
Painting?
Yeah, painting texture for the skin.
Oh, no. That texture actually I reused from some of my old man. and I just smoothed it out just to have something in there and just painted some lipstick for her.
Oh yeah, are we gonna cover makeup?
I probably will actually, but I'm not sure. Maybe the lips are gonna keep it more natural, but she definitely uses the mascara in the eyes. So I have to figure out how to do that one because it's kind of like a thick surface. It has a texture to it. So I might have to actually generate like some polygons and extrude them and do some bumps in there, something like that. I'm still not sure how I'm gonna approach it. But yeah, since I have all those things modeled for the other models, sometimes I just do that. You know, it's like I just slap in there just to have an idea about how things are. But we're gonna go baby steps, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Today we're gonna go starting with the texturing, basically like the fine detail and pores and all that stuff. And then I don't remember when we're gonna go into the texture actually, but it's a full day of texturing. For the albedo color and all that stuff. Maybe more towards the end of this week. I'm not sure. I have to check. But we're going to be detailing a lot between today and tomorrow. So basically today is going to be mostly pores and then some other breakups in between the pores. And then tomorrow we're going to get into wrinkles and stuff like that. So, all right.
Quick question.
Yeah.
About reviewing the model. When is going to be the next?
Sure, yeah. So the reviews, they happen always on Saturdays, and it's always like 2 times. It's basically like in the morning here in the United States, Los Angeles local times at 9 a.m., and then at 9 p.m. as well. So I can actually reach you guys around the world, you know. It's like, so we have like, it goes between like, I would say like 1 hour and a half to 2 hours and a half sometimes, depending on the amount of submissions you have. And yeah, so fun.
Okay, thanks.
But I'm gonna send you guys like an official invitation because it's like a separate meeting, and then a path to the Google Drive where you're gonna drop off your stuff as well. And the deadline is at until like Friday night. You know, it's like it cannot be like right before the class, before the reviews, because last time that happened, you know, it's like it was a pain in the butt to actually download the files because I was kind of like in the middle of a download from Google. And then someone dropped the stuff in there, and actually Google tried spinning and tried to recompress, I believe. And then it was taking like over an hour. I had to cancel the review and restart. Like I think it was like an hour and a half after that. So we're gonna have to set up a little deadline. So, but anyway, let's start this party, and let's get this thing going. We have a lot to deal with today. So let me just mute you guys for now. And so those pictures here I actually took myself a couple of years ago when I was still young and full of dreams and hopes. And I had like very dark hair at that point. Now it's all white. It's a mess. So I had my macro lens actually with me. It's 100 millimeters macro. And we are going around and taking pictures of people and getting some skin detail just for reference. And a friend of mine took this picture here of me, which, you know, it's like I think I showed this one at the summit. But you know, not a lot of people have all the super detailed pores. Sometimes, you know, it's like you're gonna find like much more like a smooth pores, right? But I'm a disgusting person, but I have this awesome little pores. Look at that. You can see the structure of them very well in this example here. And one thing that happens with the pores, and you're going to start seeing this as you observe the rest of the face. I mean, like they happen kind of like everywhere, but the impression we have is that they kind of like don't happen in certain parts. The thing is, like the difference is that like sometimes when you have like a hard surface, for example, like a cartilage or a bone structure, like around the zygomatic and the orbital, you have like this. The harder is the surface normally underneath, the more likely you are not going to see a lot of the detail, a lot of the pores, because it's stretching the skin. But the pores are definitely there. So it's almost like if you look at my nose here, you go from those super deep pores here, and they start blending here, and there's movement. Of course, there's a lot of marks of, it's like facial expression done over the years, right? Like, so we're going to have all those little marks in there. And when you make the transition between this area here and my nose, you start seeing that the pores are still there. It's just that they're kind of lifted, right? They kind of like, they are not as deep at that spot. If you go to certain other areas, for example, like if you go up here close to the eyes now, you're going to start seeing that the structure of the skin starts changing a little bit, right? So you go from having all those pores, you just make bigger my cursor here. You see like all those pores around there, around here, and then it becomes like micro wrinkles, and then they basically disappear. They become this other type of texturing here, right? So now you have like all this breakup surface right here, and then the pores are basically like restart right there. So basically like where the transition, it's like between this bald part here, the part where I have some hair in here, that's basically where you're gonna start seeing more pores, right? So the pores happen like everywhere around the face, but then around the eyes, they kind of like go away, right? And they give room to all those wrinkles instead. Around this area here, you cannot see much, but it's interesting to think that right at the top of this little bump here, for your basically like your nose right here, right? So it's like around this bump here, you're gonna notice that it seems like the pores kind of go away. It seems like they are not quite there. They become something else, like similar to this, right? But in fact, they are all there. It's just that they're very stretched with the bone underneath it, right? And a cool one that shows this perfectly is this one here. Look, this compression, right? It's all this stuff here with I think this is Philip actually. Basically, like with that neutral pose that he was making, you could not see any of this stuff. But as soon as he started the compression, then all of a sudden the pores become deep again, right? So you're gonna notice like the pores, like the deeper they are, it's normally like the fleshiest parts of the skin. For example, like the cheeks, the chin, right, and a little bit around this area here as well. And then sometimes it gets although like it's not very fleshy on your forehead, you still can see plenty of them. Not as deep, but still can see plenty of them. But those areas here definitely you can see a lot. The nose is just because it has an expression, but probably you're not going to see a lot of them around here. The website that actually talks about that is that one I posted the link to you guys in the website, right? So based like this one here. It shows like the difference in it's like different in wrinkles from different parts of the face, right? So you're gonna see like different wrinkles, but common between people, just like in some people a little bit more faint than others, right? And then it's like if you switch to the side, for example, you're gonna see those other ones. It's like the periorbital lines. It's like, so they're always like in a very similar spot. It's just like they change in terms of like the depth and slightly the shape, right? But pretty cool. So that website is a good reference as well. So going back here, for example, to the nose, you're gonna notice that the pores are still there, but like I said, they're kind of lifted, right? They're not as deep anymore. So in some areas here, you only see like the blackheads. In this case here, they're kind of like yellow heads, right? But the pores are definitely there. It's just that they're very, very shallow, right? And you're going to start seeing this kind of effect here all over the face for older people, Like if you look at someone really old, like in this case here, right? I mean, like this old lady, if you get really close, you're probably going to start seeing less and less. It's basically like the pores are supposed to be here, right? You can see that there's like little mentions of them, like little things in there, but they're not deep at all. They become like micro breakups, right? So basically like you see like wrinkles on top of wrinkles. And then the pores themselves are very, very shallow, right? And then you get a little deeper again around here, right? You can see some of them. And then probably around the chin, yeah, around here, right? But then again here, they kind of like lifted, and then you barely can see them in certain areas, right? So with age, I mean, like the skin gets like paper thin, and then it's almost like they kind of lose the elasticity, right? Because that's what happens actually. Let's see, I was just solving a problem with my tablet here. So this is an example that's silly, but I use to exemplify what I mean when I sculpt my pores. And this is like a tufted couch, right? And with tufted couches, what happens is that it's basically a network. And you can see like, let me just cancel this. It's a network, and you can see that they kind of like, each one of those little straight lines, they actually reach to the next one, right? So kind of like, you know, it's like you have a little button in the middle. So it causes that little pressure that causes the, you know, it's like the pore to form. But then imagine if that little button for right in the middle, with age, it was starting to get a little bit more loose, right? And basically, like imagine like there's an elastic that's holding everything in there, and it gets old as you get older. That elastic is going to start releasing, and then this is going to get more and more shallow, right? That's what's happening with that old lady, right? Like all the pores are still in the same spot. It's just that they're much more shallow now. So it goes from something deep like that to something more like this, you know. But it's interesting the structure of them, right? Like, because they're kind of like definitely they look like little pores. You know, if you compare this to my skin right here, it's the same principle. It's just like obviously it's much more organized in there, right? Like they're just like perfectly placed. This is another common mistake here. I saw some of you guys already doing some tests with pores. But what happens with the pores, in fact, is that the more randomness you add to them, the more natural they look like. So there is a little bit of a pattern, obviously. So if I start like drawing a pattern in between them, connecting dots here, you're going to start seeing, for example, that they go, oops, let's do it straighter. So, you know, it's like if I connect, you're going to start seeing like those diamond shapes, right? But it's not like a perfect pattern. Sometimes you're going to get some of them connecting like this, that, right? So it's not like you're going to do something like, let's say, something like this, right? And call it done and put the pores in the middle, right? That's not going to work. If you do something that's like just like dot, 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 that's not going to sell as something natural, right? So let's do a little test in here so you can see how random things are. Let's try to add some color here in some of them. And you're going to see that the pattern is quite random. So we're going to see like there's a little structure, but at the same time, it's not like perfect. So I'm going to just put a dot on top of each one of them I'm seeing here. Also for us to see how dense they are in relation to, you know, to an area of that size. Just going to do a couple here so we can actually have a feel of it. Some of them are so faint you can barely see it, but they're definitely there.
Chris, you can call it more like a Voronoi pattern instead of a more organized.
Yeah, it's more random. It's not like a diamond shape kind of thing, you know. So I'm just like counting here now so I can actually see how many we're gonna get in this space. So it's kind of like, let's say, Yeah, you see, like they are not following like a perfect pattern at all. So we have more space in between those guys than the here. You know, it's like they get closer and they get further again apart. And basically, like the density of them is what makes or breaks. You know, it's like in those areas. So when you're sculpting something, if you do the pores like too big, so for example, if they're too big, like if you're adding, let me just create another layer here. If you're just like adding little stars, right? Because normally people make little stars, which is another thing we have to correct. It cannot be like perfect little stars. You have to have a structure to it. And you just like skip, you know, so I can just do it in some of them like that. You're gonna start looking fake. Because what happens is that there's too much distance between them, right? And then when you look at the spores, the way that they happen in real life here, you see like those little, almost like those little rays, like imagine like the little suns, right? And then you see those little rays going like this, and they're trying to connect to the next one, right? So for example, like if you have this one here, so there's a little ray that's gonna try to connect to that point, and then it's gonna keep like doing this until it finds another one, and then connects to that one, just like with the couch, right? It's almost like because of the pressure that's going in, the soft skin around it, it's going to try to find the path of least resistance, and then it's going to try to connect to the next one. So you're going to have all those little guys connecting to the next ones, right? So the important thing here is to actually, when you sculpt the pore, to have like enough fall off with those little guys, but like not strong. They have to go like almost completely disappear when you get like further and further. Because when you're drawing them, you're going to try to draw them in the surface close enough. So when you draw this one here, instead of having this huge gap in between here, you're going to try to do one here that's going to basically like try to connect to the next one. So we're going to create like these structures in between the pores that's going to be very important to create like this breakup. And of course, there are other techniques we're going to be using to actually break up things a little bit further, right? But the important thing is like is to get like the distance between the pores correct. So something like this, you know, it's like that's kind of like the density I see in there. And then to draw them big enough so they can connect to the next one, but like going very, very small in detail before it connects to the next one, right? So you start like a deep, and then, you know, it's like as you go closer and closer, it gets thinner and then shallower, right? Until it becomes like almost disappears, just enough so you can connect to the next, to the neighbor, right? Reaching to the neighbors like that. So we're gonna do some exercise with that. And we're gonna start doing like some sculpting of those pores. And also we're gonna be doing some breakup already in between them. There's a couple of things you can use actually. There is the micro displacement or micro bump that we're gonna be using in Maya. And in the past, I would just like paint, actually create like a little texture in ZBrush and capture as an alpha just for that micro breakup. But then Jason Hill actually in the last class, he was actually experimenting with Arnold's the cell, what's the name? Cell noise or noise cell or something like that. And it's basically like you have a couple of presets. There's one that's kind of like a crocodile skin in there. And that makes a beautiful like breakup for in-between stuff. And the advantage is that it's completely seamless, right? Because it's procedural. So that's basically what we're going to be using for that. For something more precise, then you can always refer to that website that I point you guys to as well. This one here, right? That talks about the microgeometry. That really makes like the fine detail. You know, it's like it shows like how different it is. For example, like this is the original one, just displacement. This is the actual picture. This one's the picture, and then this one here is the actual the render with the, actually this is the render, right? Yeah, this is the render. So this is the render with the micro breakup, and this is the picture as a reference, right? So this is the picture, and then so it's pretty cool. But we, like I said before, like this content that I show you guys here, it's my own approach to skin. You know, it's like I'm not using like scientific methods. What I'm doing is just like simply observing what I see, like in references and things like that, and I try to emulate it in an artistic way. So basically, like the pore that I sculpt is like, it's not like a precise pore, right? It's just something that works for me. And so let me just show you this from the previous classes, just as an example. So like this guy here, right? So this is from the first class. So you see, like there's a lot of depth of field here, so I cannot see much of it. But it's almost like I'm creating like the impression that things are there without being completely precise, right? So this one here as well. So you're gonna see like the distance between them has to look like somehow realistic, right? And so the first step is to actually try to get the distance between the pores correct. And then from that point on, then it's a matter of like adding more and more variation. So for this guy here, the approach was different because I started with a lot of pores and then it wasn't working because he's an older guy, right? So I kept the pores mostly around this area here and then the chin. And then around this area, I smoothed them out almost completely and I started adding those micro wrinkles, just like in the reference for older people that I was showing, right? And then you get like in this area here, so the pores I came all the way around here, this ring, so like around here and here, and then basically around here, I basically like I didn't sculpt any pores around the eye bags, right? So we're gonna be doing stuff like this during the class. So let's do some exercise here. Let me put this one on the other side so I can actually refer to the size and the distance between them. And then let me go to my ZBrush here. And let's take a look at this. So this is the model's the current state. And then we're gonna be adding a lot of detail in here. You guys might be wondering like, oh, but I don't have my primary and secondary forms completely finished yet. And then I say, screw that. No, it's just because like a lot of people are afraid of touching like HD geometry before like really getting everything into place. And the thing is like I try to do everything almost like at the same time, striving for results, right? So, and I also try to play to work smart in a way that I want to save some time, right? Like adding pore by pore, it's a pain in the butt. I mean, like it takes hours and hours, right? I would say like if you do one by one, all the pores with some experience already doing this before, you can get the entire mask, which is basically like the entire face right here, except for like the sides of the face and neck. I think you can get in about 8 hours or something. You know, it's like if you do kind of like one by one, right? But we're gonna be using some cheats here. We're gonna create a little array of pores so it can help you with that. And then you know, it's like if your likeness, for example, like your subject is completely asymmetrical, it doesn't matter. As long as your model is symmetrical, your topology is symmetrical, you can always create like a symmetrical version of it just for the purpose of sculpting it, because you want to save some time sculpting those pores if you're going to do by hand, trust me. If you want to use like anything else, like texturing XYZ is an excellent product. We don't use it in this class here. But yeah, I'm not gonna fight with you if you want to use it, or if you want to mix it too. You know, it's like use a little bit of that and some of my techniques in here if you like it. But as a matter of like pride, I would say I sculpt everything here using my own stuff, right? So let's start with this. So let's get the plane 3D, and I'm just gonna create make polymesh 3D. Just click polymesh 3D. Let's turn on the frame. So Shift F, right? And then I'm gonna subdivide this. So let's do, I have like 1,000 polys right now. Let's subdivide, Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D. Let's subdivide a couple of times. Let me see how many times. Geometry, subdivide 6 times, right? Actually 5 times on top of the lowest. So with that resolution, I have like 1 million polygons. I should be good to attempt to show you this. So I have my own pores in here. They're already created. I'm gonna show you how they look like. So this is the default intensity that I use. So you see like it's nothing super fancy, right? There is nothing, let me see, let me show you display property, double. And then let's turn off the perspective. So the depth looks like this. If you go to the side, it's not very deep, right? It's just like that. Obviously, I'm just using the intensity of 42 in my case here. In your case, it might be different. And then you might get like deeper pores if you want. or shallower, right? But that's the default that I use. As you can tell here, in terms of the detail, it's not something super detailed, right? It's almost like if you do too detail, if you do like those wrinkles too sharp, it starts reading a little bit too fake, you know, when you start applying them all together. One thing that's important is to actually create some variations. So you see, like I break them up quite a bit when it gets to those areas here. I can actually do some sculpting here to show you. So let's see if I go to my carve brush. Let's get this one. And maybe lower intensity. So, you know, it's like when you get to those areas here, if you get like too sharp, for example, if I do something like this, when you start applying them, you know, it's like in the context of the whole thing, you're going to start seeing that you start looking a little bit too fake. So the way I start something like this, you can try something like, let's get the default brush, standard brush, sorry. And then we can click the alpha 39 and you can go to alpha menu and you can just modify it to have like a little spike like that, right? So if I switch this one to the drag rectangle, let's do it much stronger than that. So if I have something like this is a good starting point for a pour, right? So let's do this in a new plane here. Let's start with the plane, make Polymesh 3D, Control D, 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 D. And then I'm just gonna click, so what I did there. So it was like a alpha 39 and then drag rectangle. And then I tweaked the alpha 39 to have a little peak, right? A little point right there. So that's basically the upside down tip of your tool, right? So that's how deep it's gonna get. So I switched my intensity here to around 40, right? And then if you click and drag, it goes up, right? If you click and drag holding Alt, it goes down, or you just switch to C sub in there, it's the same. So you can start with something like this. Actually, let me make it much bigger so we can actually use a lot of the resolution. Something like that, right? It might be a little deep. Can actually correct that later. And then the important thing is, if I switch to this guy here, let's bake it in here so you can see. So let's put in a little perspective maybe. Yeah, like that. So I'm just gonna press Shift S just to bake it. And let's switch back to our guy right here. So basically, like the first thing I would do here, I'm gonna start like, I can use, you can just press like E, right? To get to scale. You can scale a little bit shallower like that. So from the side, right? Turn off perspective and just go like that. So you get a little shallower. And then from here, you can start building things. I normally use the clay buildup and I add an alpha, like alpha 35, for example, or 37. And then I can start actually sculpting it. But one thing I'm gonna do first, let me just mark those little areas in here. So if I try to emulate that, so I'm gonna start with my little brush here, which is like, it's the same alpha basically, it's the alpha 39 with a very sharp point like that. And just instead of like the drag rectangle, I'm just using the dots, right? So basically what I'm gonna do, I can start like very far. I'm gonna do like low intensity with 6. And start very far and very faint, and then with the pressure, start increasing the pressure and trying to keep things a little bit more wobbly, right? Instead of like a straight line, just gonna go a little bit more wobbly like that. So from here, and then obviously we're gonna be adjusting things. And then you can start breaking things up. For example, like from here, you can actually break into 2. This guy here, I think right there, I actually broke up into, oops, into many parts. So for example, from here. Important thing is that you actually keep things a little bit more random, right? They have to look organic. And then in between here, you can actually add some stuff, you know, it's like for example, like you can even come with a line coming the opposite way, just to add those little triangles, you know, it's like in, when you carve the whole thing. So now that I have everything marked in there, I can start building up with the clay buildup. So it's just gonna start like getting closer to this area, right? Using, I'm gonna try not to go too high around here. Instead of like going higher, I'm just gonna stop building around here, this border, right? Instead of like building all the way this area here. I don't like having all this bump around there. I like having this one flat with the surface. And then I'm gonna show you how to do the opposite. So basically like we're gonna carve those areas deeper. So just gonna build all the way to the border here, but without going too crazy. Something like that. And then you can start pinching this if you want. So for example, if you need a little bit more of compression happening right in the middle, you can always go to the lowest resolution, or at least like a couple of resolutions lower. And then you can go to your inflate brush. So press I, then inflate. And then around here, you can actually intensity very low at 3 or something like that. You just go around here. Just pinch a little bit. Even inflate a little bit around there. Then go to the highest resolution again. So you got a little bit more of a structure in there. And then if you have some intersections, you can just like smooth them a little bit, right? And now, for example, like to create this effect that things are getting a little bit deeper in there, instead of like building things around it, like I said, it's like you can add a little bit of volume sometimes, but don't go too crazy adding too much volume around everything, because that's gonna fight against you later. So I'm gonna just go to my carve brush that I wanna just show you with alpha 39 and that little spike. And then I can go to intensity very low, for example, like I can do like 3, right? So I'm gonna go one subdivision level less or 2, and I can just like carve this, like a second pass on top of that, right? Top of those little guys, I'm gonna add a second pass so I can actually get some extra depth in there. And I'm gonna go with the brush very big, as you can tell, because I wanna create a nice falafel around it. That kind of stuff, you know. So if you keep doing this, you know, it's like you can add some more like little ones, right? Like around it. So you can get like some little cuts, like I said, go to a resolution a little bit higher. Might need some more resolution. I'm just like at medium polygons here, but you can go as far as you need to go. And then again, you know, it's like you can just add some details, but without going too sharp with them. So basically like you're gonna go add some of them just to break things up. Smooth it out a little bit. Oh, that's too big. Even add some like that and then smooth out, you know. Little things here and there you can do. Just to add a little bit more complexity, but without going too insane. And they have to actually talk to the neighbor like we were talking about before, right? So, you know, it's like if you have something little microstructures on the sides, it's all good, but just don't go too crazy with it. And now obviously with the move brush, you can actually fix some stuff here. You can actually make those structures a little bit tighter. You can actually get some of them and make those lines a little bit more wobbly, right? So it's not like completely perfectly straight, right? So you can just go side to side, for example. And then obviously, like it's not the same result because that's a different session right there. But that's kind of like the idea, you know? So once you have that, you just smooth out around here from the highest resolution. So just around here. Smooth it out just to remove some of that stuff. So now that you have your pore in there, or butthole, which is another way to call pores. So I'm gonna turn off my perspective And now I have this guy here, right? So let's say you want to capture this. You have a couple of options, right? You can always do like, you can go from here, for example, and you can just go to alpha, and then you can say a grab document, right? And you're gonna capture it, but it's not cropped. And the old way of doing it, which is the way that I normally use, I use the old school way. That's this. Basically, like there's this brush. If you click this tool here, there is a tool called MRGBZ grabber. This one actually grabs everything. It grabs the alpha and the texture and everything. We don't need the texture, but it's a good grabber because it captures a perfect square. So it's already cropped for you, right? So if you click on it, the only disadvantage is that's going to ask to switch between 3D to 2.5D. So you just click switch, not a big deal. And then you're going to have to actually try to imagine the center of this, right? It's like kind of like I'm going to eyeball the center here. And then by pressing shift, it's going to lock and create a square. So as I drag, I have shift. And I'm going to try to use this entire area, something like this. Right. So now you capture the pore in there and capture this texture that I don't need, like I said. So I'm going to turn it off. And now I can switch to 3D again. To switch to 3D, you just draw your model again. So click and drag. Oops, not this one. Sorry. Pick the model again. So in this case here, we can actually go to my model and then just draw it. Click edit. And then let's go back to my alpha here. So let's go, I have my single pore. Let me switch the single pore here. I'm gonna just replace the alpha, but I'm gonna copy it first. So brush, I'm gonna clone it. And then with the clone now, I can actually mess around. So I'm gonna just switch to the one I created, right? Which is this one here. So it's a different little pore. So let's do the plane, another plane. So let's do make polymesh 3D. Subdivide a couple of times. Let's go to 4 million polygons now. From there. And then this is our brand new pore that we just created, right? So it looks like this. The intensity obviously is going to be dependent of how you save your brush. So for example, like if you do like a 20, right, you're going to get a very, very subtle version of it. If you go at around 40, that's basically what I did. It's like my default is like 42. That's what you get. And then now when you start like drawing them, you're going to see that you're going to do like big enough and with a certain distance that's just enough for them to start looking like they're about to connect with each other, right? And then when you apply them, when you're drawing those into the surface, you try to spin around because it's basically like, see, like I can spin them around instead of like doing every time like the same direction. You get used to actually when you draw it, you just spin in a different way. You know, it's like, for example, like let's say like I'm gonna do it like from bottom to top, and then from left to right. You know, stuff like that. And obviously, you have to maintain a certain distance, right? That it has to make sense. It doesn't need to be perfect like we saw before. Some of them are going to be more distant than the other ones. But at the end, that's basically like
Chris, do you know how to not make the alpha bulge out? Because mine is got like a bulge, like a pop, like a circle, you know.
What's the question? Sorry.
So when I put as a brush alpha, then I drag it on the plane. It's like inflate, not like the same like yours.
Oh, okay. Let me talk about that. So I'm just gonna ask you guys like to save the questions for the second hour, because it's easier for me to edit later on those videos. You know, if I want to do some editing, if I don't have like questions and answers right in the middle of the explanation. But okay. Yeah. But that's a good question. So let me go through this. So for example, like I have the alpha in here, and I think what you're saying is this. So when you, I think like by default, the mid value here is something like this, right? So you see something like this. So it has like a little fall off around it. So when you sculpt it, you see something like this, right? So the thing here, like the trick is to actually find a value that's like the mid value has to match an average of that. So in my case here is around 89. So around 89, I think was what I did, or 90. So now basically like it's right against the surface, right? Another way to see if it's a perfect amount is basically like turn off the, this guy here, the radial fade. So like instead of like 10 that I have here, by default is 0, right? So if I draw with 0, well, it's actually working. Let me turn off, let's see, focal shift 0 at -100. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, so if you do the focal shift at -100, so basically like press the space bar to get to this menu, go focal shift, bring it all the way down. So you're gonna see like now there's a little bit of a difference. There's a little step in there, right? So if you wanna get something really close to the surface, the best way is to actually play with this value here. So 90, let's try 95. Still a little step. Let's see if it's too high. Let's see if 100 it eliminates it completely. Yeah, the 100 is pretty close to the surface, but not quite. You see, like you still see a little step negative now. So let's try 99. Yeah, it's gonna have to be 100 because I sculpted straight from the plane without changing too much of the surface around it. Like I said before, I was careful about that. So yeah, at 100 here, so I'm gonna have that. So, but you still get a little bit of the squareness around it, right? So you can do like, you can bring the focal shift again back to 0. And in this case here, it's gonna eliminate that. And if it still doesn't, then you can also always use like a radial fade. So like the radial fade actually is gonna bring a little bit more of gonna smooth out stuff, right? But because it's working already without the smooth fade, I'm gonna keep it off like that, because I think I can get more detail from the borders in there. So the beginning is like this, right? But even if you do like in a very random way, like I said before, still is gonna look a little mechanical, right? So for example, like you have all those guys placed in there, but you look, and although they look kind of natural because the shape, right? Like it's not like I'm looking for a perfect pattern, for example, like this, and then, you know, this. There's a little bit more randomness to it, right? But that's not all. We're gonna have to do something to actually break up the surface in between them, right? You see like those little guys that I added, start adding some detail around it that help, right? So maybe I could had gone a little bit further because I have it in there. I can go there now and do some more tweaking, capture it again and bring it back and test it again. You know, it's like until you are happy with the pour. But you see like the intention here is to actually have some of those guys to create some of the in-between detail for you, right? And look like they are actually reaching to the next one, right? So if I rotate like that, kind of like it fills up that little area, right? It's almost like creates those little triangles, you know, it's like in between them. But then there's another brush that I use to help me with the randomness in between stuff. That's this this guy here. Let me show you how I built it. Skin random. So this is the default alpha that comes with ZBrush. So it's alpha 58, so you can click that one. And then under alpha here, the only change I did is just like I made it a little bit sharper. Basically like brought more into a curve here. It starts straight, right? So I brought a little bit more into a curve like that. And then I use the spray. So the spray here is set by default, placement at 0.5 and the flow is 0.25. Color doesn't matter because we are not painting any color. And the scale is at 1. So this is all default, right? So a couple of ways you can use this brush here. There is one way that I use that's basically to add direction. So if you just like do a line like this, you're gonna create that type of effect. You can come with a line parallel, right? And then you can come with another line, instead of parallel, it's slightly diagonal to it. And you can create a very, very nice microstructure for your skin, just like that, right? But that's kind of like directional, right? If you want to create something that's more interesting for like a leathery kind of effect, that's very useful for like the in-between stuff like that. Then instead of like doing, oh, I undo a little bit too much. You just do like everything in a circular motion, because when I did like in a line like that, right? So if you're doing circles, you can just reduce intensity a little bit, maybe like 9. And then the effect is different because it adds this kind of breakup. I'm just like going in circles and avoiding going over the same spot again, right? Just adding that little you can go over just like very, do like a little subtle stuff if you want to go over, just to fill up some areas. So if you add the two of them together, for example, like if you have something like this, it starts adding a little bit more of an organic feel. And like I said before, we're going to be using micro displacement or micro bump in between stuff. But I still add this stuff in ZBrush, in ZBrush, because I want to get that breakup in there. Sometimes if it's too much, you can actually go a little bit, lower intensity, and then do the rest, like the super fine stuff with the micro bump itself, right? And then there's a lot of other stuff you can do to help with the natural feel to it, right? One of them is actually sculpt those pores with different intensities. So if I have them, with that intensity at 42, from time to time, instead of like doing 42, I can just come with like 34. So I'm gonna do like let's say like 34, 34, and switch to a little bit lower than that, and then go back to 34. This kind of stuff can help to actually add some natural look to it, right? I screw up the distance in there because I was not paying attention, but that's what I meant. It's like it's just playing with the intensities, and try not to play too much with the sizes though. You apply the size, but it has to be like a similar size to the previous one, right? And then obviously, like if you want to go even crazier with it, you just reduce the intensities a little bit and do like a big one like that, just to actually go a little bit deeper. Or if you want to do like without destroying the form, because if you're using anything like this, like the default brushes, normally it destroys the form that's underneath it, right? But there is a brush in here that's called the elastic brush. And the elastic brush is really good because you can actually add form like that, and it just like drags without destroying the form that's underneath, right? So if you just play with it like that, it looks like crap. It doesn't look like it's gonna work for us. But if you do a few tweaks, for example, if we just reduce the intensity from 87, that's the default, something around like 30 something. And then instead of like going back and forth in the same spot like that, you just go like, just like one stroke like this, and go to the next one, another stroke, just like one direction. You can actually start building things up. So for example, like you can build some of those little pillows in there, right? So for example, like you can actually add some more interest in the pores if you want to go that far, right? For example, if it's the hero area, for example, like the cheeks, I would say like, yeah, everything is worth in there because it has to look cool, and it's the most visible part because the cheeks are basically the areas where you're gonna get the highlights to hit it, right? So for example, like you have the light hitting in there, it definitely is gonna show up. So anything you can do to help. So the same way I'm doing like just little lines like that, just to help with the volumes, right? You can actually play with the same elastic brush, but mix with other stuff. For example, I can click the drag rectangle, and I can add an alpha here. So for example, if I have an alpha, let me use my alpha 39 again. So just by doing that, I'm creating the little pore in there. Maybe 39 is not a great one because it has a weird fall off. Let's go 37. 37 is more interesting. So let's crank the intensity here. 63. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So for example, like if I wanted to make some of those guys a little bit deeper, I can just go the opposite, right? I can just go like this, and I can go right on top of it and draw it right there, right? So you're gonna get some depth into it without destroying any of the form because we're using elastic as the base for everything. So it doesn't matter where I do it, the form is gonna follow instead of like being completely destroyed, right? So that kind of stuff is cool, It's like you can do like for the negative stuff like that, so you add more depth, like as I said, it's like so we get more variation in the pores, or you can use for bumps. So if I have the same one, instead of like using the negative going down like that, I can actually pick another alpha. Let's say, let's see, one here, 30. I don't know if 40 is a good one. 41. Yeah, 41 is a good one. So this one was 41. Yeah, you can do positive like that. In that case, you can actually use as pimples, right? So you see like the fall off is pretty big, so it looks very soft. if you want to force a little bit harsher, just press space, right? And then bring the focal shift back a little bit. And now you get a little bit sharper in the borders. If you go too crazy like that, then it's gonna, yeah, actually it's not doing too much. I think this one I would have to force it to actually get a little bit harsher line around it. Yeah, that's too much. But you know what I mean. So it's like if you tweak this line here, yeah, that's too square. Let's try to get this point a little bit more round like that. Let's see. Still a little wobbly. Let's get, let's see, let's reset this one and just gonna add one a little bit like that. Yeah, kind of like that. So for example, in this case here, you can actually add a lot of pimples around stuff. You know, like you can increase the intensity, you know, and then obviously like the fall off here, I have to do a better job that I did. There's the little square at the top, but it's good to actually, you know, it's like just to add pimples and things like that. Yeah, and like in a random way, right? It's useful for, you know, certain areas like nose and stuff like that. Oh, for the nose, by the way, we're gonna talk about another one here that I have, which is this brush here. So let's see if I can find it. I think I have my light box here. It's easier to find. Let's see. No. Do I have it here? I thought I had it. Standard. It's not in order, huh? No, I think I have it here at work. I don't have it here, so I'm gonna have to search for it. So let's see, intro pimple. So if I can tell, oh, pimple right here. So pimple 2, that's not the one. I have pimple 1. Okay, so this is the one I use for the nose, for example. So the alpha I'm using is the same alpha 39, and I'm using the stroke like the drag rectangle. But the alpha here, I tweaked this curve to look like this. So basically, like he creates like a peak, it goes down, creates a cavity, and then it goes back up. So when you do it, it looks like this, right? So in the context here, like without anything around it, it looks a little mechanical, right? But when you have like skin around it like that, it looks very nice. You know, it's like it can create like blackheads. So that's how I create all the blackheads for the nose for all those characters, right? So those are just like some of the examples to help to break up the skin. Obviously, there are other things, like if you have like a random pores, for example. Let's see, this is random stubble skin pores. So this is just like a spray. So I'm using like a 0.5, that's the default, flow 0.25, that's the default as well. Again, alpha 39, and then it has a little bit of a tweak in the curvature, right? It looks like I've added some extra point in there, maybe to create a little effect. So if I just do like outside, it looks like this, right? If I add that into here in this area, get a little bit more variation. If I do the opposite, pressing Alt, there's some extra pimples in there. So anything you can actually do, you know, it's like to add some variation is good. So this one here is skin pores. There's another one. So this one works differently. So it's a little bit more subtle. You just add almost like this hammered metal kind of effect, right? So this one is as well, you can do like positive and negative. So just use for, you know, it's like around the stubble, things that are like that. And this one here is using the standard as the base, but yeah, again, you can use with the elastic, right? If you do the spray with elastic, then you should be able to preserve all the forms underneath. So with all of that being said, and you can actually rewash that. So if you have any question about it, I think it's all there. Let's do some work around the face. Let's see what time this is. 10:24, so pretty close. And then let's isolate some areas here. So let's do, oops, let me see if I have my poly frame here. Nope, it's all gone. So let's do the poly groups again. And I'm gonna click auto groups with UV, because everything is UV. And just got Control Shift click, Control Shift click. And then I'm gonna be using basically like the lips and nostril, not this one. That should be enough. And the eyes, probably I'm not gonna use the eyes just now, but the eye bags. So just the face right there. And then let's just hide, let's go higher in resolution. I'm gonna hide the back of the head right here. And even the neck. So now I have the face in there. Let's just go HD. So let's turn off. You can turn off to see like the form if you want, but I'm just gonna keep with the texture here. Actually, let's turn off the texture. And let's do, I'm gonna rest my mouse around here, close to the nose. I'm gonna press A. Actually, right here in the cheeks. I wanna make sure I capture the cheeks. Because I'm gonna start with the cheeks. That's my favorite part every time. So let's, if you click solo here, that shows just the HD geometry, right? So you know what you're sculpting now. If you want to see the rest of the model, just uncheck solo and it shows up. But we're going to start by doing some pores in here. So the first thing you're going to do is going to make sure that I have my reference on the side, which is this one here. Oh, it's not showing. This one here, right? Because I want to capture at least like a similar amount of, a similar distance between the pores, right? So kind of like the density I want to try to represent the same way. I mean, like if you look at references around the internet, right? This is a woman here. And you find like this random references, you know, and you can tell like, you know, it's like it's a good amount of pores. They are not as deep as mine, obviously. And but it's cool that you can see like those little pores in there, but there's a lot of the other structures that are, around it, kind of like the breakups are kind of everywhere. So it's a good clue for me for the depth of the pores, you know. And obviously, just looking at this, you don't get the whole picture because of the subsurface going to smooth things out quite a lot, right? So the subsurface scattering is going to really reduce whatever you think you're sculpting there. You're probably going to have to force a little bit more to be able to represent it. So let me just bring this one here because I want to see both references at the same time. So I'm basically like using my reference and the girl's face here. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to switch to my original pour, the one that I have that actually works. Not that the one I just sculpted doesn't work, it's just because I did too fast. So for intensity, instead of my default 42 here, which makes this pour right here, right? I'm gonna think that's a little bit too strong for her face. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do with a little bit less intensity. Before I started, with one thing we can try here is something that Omid said that would be a good suggestion, and I agree with him. For example, if you go to Morph Target, you can save a Morph Target right here. Why would I save a Morph Target right here? It's because we don't have layers to work with HD, right? So for example, if I have something at the 42 here, intensity, right? And I sculpt a bunch of pores in there, and all of a sudden I was like, oh man, they are too deep and too big or whatever, or just too deep, right? You can switch to your Morph brush here. And you can go to a lower intensity, for example, like very low, say 3. And you can just morph it back. And look at that. You can just erase them just enough. So I'm gonna keep the morph target saved so we can actually use it as an emergency, right? It's gonna be cool to actually, when you start blending stuff, different areas like the cheeks and the eye bags, for example. So I'm gonna use like, intensity, I'm gonna use like probably like 30 or 29, something like that. I'm gonna start around here, just so I have like a little idea about how big I'm gonna have to go. So the size of the pores look okay-ish. So I'm just gonna try to get the distance. So I'm gonna do a couple of them here by hand like this. And then I'm gonna do like a lot of this type of work, especially like right in the middle of the face. I think I went a little bit too big already. It's like the start is always like, you have to actually really nail from the get-go. So I'm gonna just undo a couple of times here. I think like using the morph brush is faster than undoing it. It's just where is it? Morph. Where is it? But let's do it right here. Morph. Let's use a very high intensity just to eliminate them. Let's start over. So let's try pore, single pore. I'm gonna make a little bit smaller and a little bit closer. Yeah, I think this density is gonna be better. I don't know if there's a lot of difference, but now the trick here, for example, if you're sculpting this, right, and then you want to save some time, is to sculpt an array. For example, like if you sculpt all those guys into a plane, right, like this, you can capture that array, for example. Obviously not like with all the micro stuff in between, but just like, you know, if you make a circle of those guys, like I did here, check this out. So I have this guy here, that's single pore, let's see, I have saved somewhere, multi-pore, this one. So you see like it's an array like this. So if I apply it, it's a bunch of them together like this. They're closer than those ones I did in there, right? So those ones here, for example, if you have a bunch like that, you can actually use this to help to speed things up, right? So for example, like I use this a lot in areas like the chin and the forehead, for example, to save time if I'm getting like too bored with the whole thing, right? So if I go around here, for example, and if I apply it, I try to, again, like I have to pay attention with the size of it, obviously. So I'm gonna just use it right here. And then if I do something like this, for example, now I'm gonna have to actually match the size of it with my cursor. So press the space bar, gonna grow it until I have like a similar size like that, because that way I can actually do a next one, for example, like around here. And I know that I can go as far as that little border, right? So it preserves the same scale. And then around here, I can do the same. Try to avoid like, you know, it's like going over the other one. So I'm gonna have like the same size. You know, this way, if you want to do, you can do like most of the face like this. You know, I'm gonna be doing a lot of stuff manually just to show you guys, but this one can save you a good chunk of time. And then now that you have all those guys in place, you can switch to your single pore again. And then if you try to find out what's the depth of each one of them, if I get, for example, like say my intensity here is 29, I'm gonna go to 34. You guys can ask any questions, I'm here for you. So I'm just gonna be filling up those little gaps, you know? So for example, here, instead of like sculpting everything by hand, I use those circles to actually help me a lot. And then I can actually increase some of the sizes in here. Let's do that. Always trying to get them big enough so they can actually fade into the next one, right? So now from a distance here, it kind of like starts like looking kind of like the same thing, right? Obviously a couple of more tweaks and maybe like be more careful with distance, but it should work just fine. And then if you want to blend this whole thing with something else, we can always use the morph brush, right? Or we can come up with some other variations and add to the top of it, on top of it. So let's go here. So you see like that entire area now, I already have kind of like detailed right now, right? Just by having a couple of, just by using those circles. I don't know if it's possible to use like a square, for example. You can try to use a square and try to match perfectly. But the circle for me is interesting because I can rotate it and I can get more variation, right? So you see like that entire area starts to, work now. Obviously, you're going to try to avoid areas like the lips, right? We're not going to be doing that. But let's do some more manual work here. Because when it gets to this area here, it starts getting a little tricky. So let's start doing a transition area. Oh, see, I sculpted the reverse version of it. So let's do around here. Again, trying to.
Hello, Chris.
Yes.
So I'm kind of lost. Well, not lost, but I was wondering what the next step were. Like, we're now going to do the pores, and we're working on secondary forms at the same time, or how was it?
Yeah, I mean, like my workflow is normal. Like I get the model kind of like in a ballpark, but not finished, right? So I get the model that I'm happy with. So if you guys are still struggling with the model, I would try to get a little further with the model in terms of like having the structure and the anatomy close enough, but not perfect. And then from that point on, we're gonna be going basically like in and out of HD just to fix like secondary forms, and then obviously tertiary you're gonna be keeping working until like all the way until the end. But then primary and secondary are gonna be going back and forth, So I will not worry too much if the model is not finished when it comes like to the secondary forms, because yeah, we have plenty of room to adjust unless the model is very different from the final form. And in that case, you might get a lot of stretching and stuff like that if you pull the forms too much sideways. But if you're careful pulling the forms like with a big move brush, for example, and doing like in the direction of the normals, I think you should be completely fine.
Okay. Yeah, the thing was that I'm trying to make Willem Dafoe.
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of have like a really asymmetrical face. So, yeah, but I'll start building the pores and then build the asymmetry later.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
yeah.
like you can start like the asymmetry now if you want, as long as your topology is symmetrical, and just like make an average. It's like just do the smart resim in ZBrush just to create an average, and then that way you should hit. It's like if you do smart, for example, like if you pull things around to look asymmetrical, but being careful about like not pulling like small areas, right? Like, but rather like bigger areas, you should be able to get like a very consistent model that should deform just fine,
Okay. Oh, all right. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
And well, also I was thinking about making some like varying expressions. Just to show.
Yeah.
And I was kind of messed up on how we could like get different displacement maps from ZBrush, one for the small pores and another one more secondary for wrinkles and all that. And I didn't know how to export that or how to think of a system like that.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, like in this class we do mostly like for still, not so much like for like an animation task, for example. But I know there's a way to actually mix displacement maps. I particularly I have to experiment with that. I know that at work we use that definitely. If, like for when we did the Hulk, we did a lot of animated displacements, and but I'm not sure, it's like within Arnold how the maps would be plugged. But I don't mind researching, so I can coming up with an answer. But yeah, I mean, like it's not something that I normally do. But,
okay, don't worry. Yeah.
But no, it's a cool idea. It's not something I normally do like for my personal work, but I don't mind doing as a research.
Okay, if you could, I mean, I'm going to also go and research because I'm saying this, but I've been out for this weekend and I wasn't able to check that out. But if you could give us a little help in that would be amazing.
Yeah, no problem, man. I can totally take a look at that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem. Let's start going a little bit more spread out here. I kind of like added them a little bit more compressed. There is obviously a lot to talk about, like the facial expression as well, right? Because she's smiling here. So a lot of this stuff would have to be stretched. So there are a couple of ways to do that. I normally like sculpt this stretch like manually. I'm gonna show you a couple of techniques to add the impression that's stretching, but not perfect, obviously. Or you can actually create versions of the pore. You can, it's like create the stretched versions of the pore and actually help with that as well. But in this case here, we're gonna just be, sculpting some of them to add some of the directionality. So I'm gonna start like actually going a little bit closer together. So you see like those ones, they start pretty far around there, because you have to understand that the cheeks, they are stretching, right? Like it's, kind of like there's a knee flate happening because of the compression of all the fat tissue underneath and everything. So obviously everything is going to look a little bit more spread out right at the middle of the cheeks, right? Around, I would say around here. It's going to be probably like the biggest distance between the pores. But then I'm going to get a little bit more compact as I go closer to this area here. So I'm going to start like actually blending those two areas now, kind of like trying to find a distance that works for both. And this kind of processing here, it's the kind of thing, right? Like if you are looking for something like a speedy version of it, that would be creating that array that I show you guys. But if you want to create something that looks more organic because you're sculpting by hand, I would say like it's a process that if you face it as almost like as a meditation, it's like you can actually put like the best music you can find, something that makes you happy, and you spend a couple of hours doing this. I would say like I don't mind like using this type of brushing here for areas like less important, but for this area here of the cheeks and the muzzle, I normally sculpt them by hand, and then I try to resolve with a little faster alternatives like the array of brushes of wrinkles in other areas. But like for this area here, try to be a little bit more careful, And the same example I saw in our group that was actually using a roll to actually try to place them manually, kind of like automatically in a line. It wouldn't work in this case here because it doesn't have enough randomness, Unless ZBrush incorporates some way of like using a roll with some really good randomness. That it's like that's a good suggestion actually for Pixelogic. If they can add some more like size and depth variation during the brush, like during the drawing of the brush, right? That would be really cool if you have like, for example, like a roll brush, but then he actually picks like in each iteration, for example, you would like vary the orientation, the size very slightly, and then the depth of it. That would be really cool, because that could really help with this. I can actually talk to Jaime and see what they say about it. It's probably not that hard to make actually. If it's too strong right now, I can actually blend this stuff back, right? Because I have that morph target saved. But it's good to have more than having less, right? The only disadvantage of that morph, the blend shape that I just created, or morph target I just created, is that if you get out of HD geometry, when you come back, it's not there anymore, right? It's kind of like it goes away. So you have to make everything in the same session, basically. I'm starting to get a little bit too close in there. I'm gonna have to be careful so I don't go too close. So I'm gonna sculpt just a little bit more around this area here. And I'm gonna start adding some stretching as well, so you can get instead of like having the same thing being done over and over again. Because that's basically like is going to be my life the next hour and a half after the class. I'm going to be placing more pores. So when I post something online tonight, you're probably going to see more of the same, but at least it's going to be a little bit more complete area, right? So I'm gonna put like some music here. The previous class I tried to play some music during this whole thing, but then music is like it's like a perfume, right? Like everybody has a different taste, so it's not like everybody's gonna like it, and I'm not gonna play. And the music I'm listening to these days a lot is Opeth. So, but not like the evil Opeth with death metal. It's basically like when you switch to the progressive rock. I totally got into their music. So Opeth, it's and Devin Townsend as well. Devin Townsend is awesome. I like progressive music to sculpt, but I listen to blues and classic rock a lot too. But I like progressive music because it's a trip, right? It's basically like it's almost like it's a visual, it's a musical story, right? Like it can be super visual, you know. It's like it inspires me to do work because I can imagine a lot of stories without seeing anything. It's just like the notes actually bring some imagery, you know. It's interesting. It inspires me a lot to do more work. Listen to like King Crimson and some Yes, and like the old school progressive stuff is pretty awesome. So I'm gonna just complete this area a little bit more here. I'm gonna start doing some variation here to show you guys, because there's a lot of interesting stuff we can do with the pores. By all means, I mean, like once you have this entire thing covered with pores, it's gonna start looking cooler, obviously, because everything's covered. But it's not going to be like anything to, you know, to look like too natural. It's going to still look a little bit artificial before you do any extra layers of stuff, you know. And by layer, I mean, like, it's just like sculpting more stuff. We don't have access to layers. So this is like old school. If it doesn't work, you blend it back, resculpt, right? And that's my trip with those classes and my personal work is that I try to emulate like a traditional sculptor in a way. Obviously, I'm using like symmetry and all these other cheats, so it's not quite the same. But I mean, like in terms of the most you can, you know, it's like pretend you're actually sculpting something. Like, what if I mess up the clay, right? Well, there's no undoing clay. It's just like it's like you raise it and do it again. So if you have that as your mantra, I mean, like it's not too painful after you try a couple of times, you know. So I'm just gonna fill some in-betweens here, just add tiny little ones in between. You see, like it's just like it's not like a matrix, right? It's pretty much like some of them are a little closer than others because I'm doing this very organically without using like a pattern that's like a preset. Because that array of pores that I'm using, it's basically a pattern, right? So if you don't add anything else on top of it, it's going to start looking very artificial after some time. But this way here is actually, it's always very organic. As long as you know what you're doing in terms of, you know, placing things with a certain distance that actually reads as natural, right? So let's say right now we have this entire area sculpted. You see like just like yapping here and things just are getting done. And basically that's what I do when I listen to music, you know, just get stuff done. And it just takes time. So I'm gonna switch to another brush here. So let's start mixing some stuff. Let's use the regular, where is it? Oh, the carve brush that I have. That's, again, it's the Alpha 39, right? With that little point right there. And then I'm using the lazy mouse. Actually, I always use lazy mouse. And by default is 0.2, this lazy step. I just go 10 times lower than that. So 0.02, otherwise it creates stepping, right? And I don't want that. So I'm gonna start adding like some micro wrinkles here. Let's look at some references first, because I'm, like I said, like I idealize a lot of stuff. So at the end of the day, I have to look at references from time to time. So especially if I'm trying to model my wife. And I don't know if I have any reference. I have this one here. Don't mind the mustache, right? I can see a tiny little ones in there, some stretching right there. That's like divorce waiting to happen, man, if she listens to me. So I have to be careful with that. The walls have ears here in this house. So, so I'm gonna be doing a little bit of that stretching in there, that little impression, you know. Like I said, like although you don't see a lot of pores here, I'm pretty sure they are there. You know, it's just like the subsurface scatter is gonna be killing a lot of them, and if they're too deep, I can always remove some of them. So I'm gonna just be doing that, and probably like those little wrinkles in here, side to side, and. Because I don't follow any rules here, because I make the rules here, man, with my own work, right? Sometimes I start with the pores and then I start sculpting the wrinkles on top of them. And sometimes it's the opposite. I basically like block the wrinkles and then I come with the pores. But the important thing to remember is that it's the path of least resistance, right? So if you're sculpting wrinkles in here, I would try to actually go, you know, so I can follow the kind of like connecting the dots, right? So for example, like if I have a wrinkle that I have to add right here, I'm gonna try to go like from one pore to the other one and break it down. So for example, like I start right here, right? Go to the next one, and the next one, then I break down, go back to that one. So for example, like I make a wrinkle that actually follows those little microstructures, right? So it doesn't need to be a perfect wrinkle. It's not like you're gonna cut the line like goes across like that, right? That's not a good wrinkle right there. That doesn't look very natural. But if you go like carefully and just connect some of those guys and break down the line, and if you use the same thought process like everywhere, for example, like if you go to the IPEX later on, you start connecting those little guys, then things start looking a little bit more natural, you know? And then there's also like the direction, right? So for example, like if I'm sculpting towards the nose in here, the direction normally goes like this, right? So it starts creating like this kind of like a arc in there. So I'm gonna be doing some of that, a little bit more straight. I can see that her face is a little bit more straight. So I'm gonna connect some of those guys and add some in-betweens as well, because they don't need to be like so, oh, you just did it again. It's that bug with lazy mouse that sometimes, you know, like you're drawing and crosses across the entire model. So I'm gonna just turn off lazy mouse for now, I think. So just to prevent that bug. I might have to tweak my intensity now. Yeah, I'm gonna tweak the intensity a little bit. Actually, I think it should work. Let's see. Yeah, it should work.
Chris,
Yes.
Ricard here has a question.
Yes.
He said, how do you evaluate that size and depth looks correct? It seems quite easy to lose the sense of proportion working so close to the model.
Ah, that's a good question. I would say it's experience. Because, I mean, like everything is very idealized, right? And like I said, like you have to have some references, right? If you get like some pictures from the internet, it's a matter of like observing the size. There's no like, you know, it's like a number or anything like that. If you get like in the ballpark, a similar distance between the pores, it should work. If it's too spread out, it's not gonna work. If it's too tight, it's not gonna work. It's gonna look artificial. But also the amount of variation you add by just like adding all those little techniques that I showed before, that helps a lot as well. But it's all a matter of like, you know, it's like observing and trying to represent it. For example, like number of eyelashes, right? If you have 200 eyelashes at the top and you have 100 eyelashes at the bottom, right? That's like the ballpark. If you decide to add like 400 at the top, all of a sudden it's gonna like look too dense. And if you add like 50 at the top, it's gonna look too low. So it's a matter of like, okay, observing what happens in nature in average and try to represent, you know. Yeah, I mean, like there is no science behind it other than experimenting. You're probably not gonna get right straight away. So be prepared for some frustration. But I mean, like, I think like if you look at the video, you saw that, for example, like I started with a certain distance in here and I went a little bit tighter around here, right? But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, you know, it's like you can have a little idea just by looking at it, right? That's kind of like a distance that should work. You see, like I got a little bit tighter in here. I might have to erase those and do a little bit more spread out again. But yeah, there is no other way other than observing, you know. I would say like look for references. There's that very cool resource page that Palomita posted. That's this skin resource here. I actually posted lots of. I posted this link here in different places. You know, it's like start looking at stuff like this. You know, see like how shallow they are here. This kind of effect you can actually get, like you see like just the little dots in the middle in there without having the little, you know, star points. You can get that type of effect simply by smoothing things out. For example, like if I get something like this, if I smooth them out, look what you get. Like you get like just the pores themselves without like the in-between stuff that I was talking about, right? So yeah, it's just a matter of like coming up with your own set of pores, which is basically like I think it's an important part of the class that since everything is done manually, it basically like you preserve your style. You know, it's like even the pores, the way you're going to sculpt your pores, it's going to be kind of like translating your own approach to sculpting pores. You know, it's not something like, okay, you're going to use a brush from texturing XYZ, and then you're going to see like a lot of different characters with the same structure over again. This way, you're actually never going to be the same. And then the way you sculpt, you're going to be basically like if you look closely, you know, it's like just a ZBrush model. You're going to see some of the way that your particular approach to it, you know. So I think it's, yes.
Abraham here. How's it going, dude?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was looking here your process, and I was thinking there was some moment at ILM or in your professional work that you had to apply this kind of workflow, or
Yes.
this never happened before, or when I mean, we don't need to be so precise about no, this happened in 2010 or something like that, but in some moment that you are there at ILM and I mean, your supervisor or something like that comes, hey, Chris, we need to solve this problem here, and you have to start in this kind of process. I mean, when this happened, which was, I mean, the moment that you know, I think it's possible to create this workflow and create all my own portals or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, at work, what happens is that normally, like, we try to do the best we can to recreate reality, right? So basically, like, we're gonna get a lot of scan data. So for example, the likeness has to be spot on. So it's not like I'm gonna have a lot of freedom. I'm gonna have to actually just nail based on whatever we have. For the skin, either we can get like some skin detail from the person itself, like in the case of like Marco Ruffalo for the Hulk. I'm talking about it because it's already public, right? Like already was published, that kind of information. Otherwise, I would not be able to talk about. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's like we scan, for example, like his arms and hands and the face, and then I actually extracted some of the skin information and I made them into alphas, and then I used those ones to actually fill up gaps. So when I needed to fill up gaps, for example, like if there's an area that the scan was kind of mushed, or for example, like the life gas, you know, it's like you got some life gas. For example, like some areas get a little bit, you know, rubbed, and then you don't have the detail in there anymore. So he can actually use his own skin to actually fill up those things. And right. then after some time, like observing the texture of the skin and everything from this different scans, I started realizing, you know what, I can do that like manually. I can just like sculpt manually. And I can actually go further than that. I can actually add more detail around them to create like a more interesting texture, you know? Because if you're doing like a super close-up, extreme close-ups and stuff, sometimes you don't see all this detail in there in the model, you know? For example, like this is almost like more detail than what you get with the scan. And then because I'm doing a lot of like renders, like super close-up stuff, I want to make sure that they hold up. But it's kind of like it's an interesting mission, right? Because in one hand, I'm idealizing most of it. That means like I'm sculpting stuff like out of my butt, right? Just like making things up as I go. But at the same time, I want to create in a way that actually is realistic enough that can hold up. Like if you zoom in and you look at all this stuff after render, you can actually believe it's actually skin, right? So yeah, it's kind of like it's this thing about like trying to emulate life somehow, but without being like completely precise. You know, it's like if you look at every single step in this class here, like everything you're going to be doing from this point on, every single step has a ton of room for improvement. So basically, like, you guys can take to the next level. It's just like the combination of all those things put together create a very nice final result. You know, it's like it's the skin shader, the way that I assembled the skin shader, the way that I sculpt those things by hand, everything combined creates a very realistic result at the end. But if you look at every single step, like isolated, none of them is perfect at all. You know, it's just like it's almost like I created this whole thing as a how you call, like a bench test, right? Like a test bench to actually, you know, experiment with things. You know, it's like in coming up, like, okay, challenging myself, like, okay, how am I going to be doing this? You know, it's like, if I sculpt by hand, is it ever going to look realistic, right? Is it possible to create something realistic? Because we use all the scan data, and I'm pretty sure, like, with the texture XYZ, you can get like super realistic results. It's approved, right? You just go to their website, lots of amazing stuff in there. Yeah. But then turns out that it's possible. I think, like, especially my most recent models, you know, it's like you look at them and you can see, like, the quality of the skin is looking pretty nice. You know, it's like, you can actually believe that someone. The most comments I got about Stan Winston was like, "Oh man, this is creepy in a good way." You know?
It's sicky, dude. This is so realistic. I was looking at the pictures that you showed early on the class, and the close up. It's, oh my God, what is the difference, man? I was trying to find, but it's really good. Congratulations.
Thanks,
awesome.
Man. Yeah. So the whole intention is that, you know, it's like giving you guys tools to actually be able to do that, but really leaving completely up to you guys if you want to use it or not. You know, this is my own little workflow that I develop, and I really enjoy doing it, but I don't want to torture people, you know, it's like, because maybe not everybody's going to enjoy doing all of it, like, manually. But at least, like, if you have, like, for example, like a scan, you got to scan data, and then all of a sudden, like, you see, like, it has a lot of detail in there, but you're asked to add more detail to it. You know, at least you're gonna have to, like, an idea about approaches to do it. You know, maybe not like the perfect approach, not too scientific. It's much more artistic than scientific, but it's definitely something you can use. You know, for your, especially, like, for example, like, if you're sculpting creatures, right? I do creature work at ILM as well. And at this point, I'm doing, like, some concept art right now, and it's like 3D concept. And I'm doing everything like this. But obviously, I can have much more room to extrapolate this and add, like, much more, you know, it's like radical, strong detail than with a human being. And I can get away with murder, because if it's creature, right? I mean, I can get away with all kinds of stuff. But the cool thing is that it can hold up. You know, it's like, if you want to impress the client and just, like, render some extreme close-ups, it's gonna hold up. You know, it's a little trip.
Okay, thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. So you see, like, now I got all those micro wrinkles in there, following the structure, right? Like, trying to connect some of those guys to the next ones, like the neighbors, and trying to go, you know, it's like kind of like starting to blend things, like towards the nose, right? Like kind of like similar to what I saw in the reference when I was looking at my wife. And so I'm going to be doing the same thing here, doing some of those guys. But then at some point, you might need, like, the micro ones in between. So I'm going to switch to that guy that I had before, which is the skin random, that little brush, right? I passed the settings so you can look at the video, like 0.5, flow 0.25, everything else the same. This guy, just with the alpha tweaked very slightly, just to get a little bit sharper. Oh, and I bet I added a little bit of a contrast as well. So you can copy this tab if you want. So with this brush here now, what I can do, I can actually add some direction, right? So I can just, like, brush, for example, this direction, right? So I'm gonna go over the same stuff that I had there before. Just gonna go over here, just to break up a little bit more, and then follow that direction very slightly. Same for here. And then I'm gonna go this direction here, kind of crossing over slightly. Right there. So you start adding a little bit more of this micro detail in between. And that's the stuff that's gonna break up the specular. Once the specular, the light hits this area here, if you had just the pores, you would look cool. But if you have the pores plus this micro detail in there, now the forms start getting more complex. You know, it's like when the light hits it, it's gonna basically like hit those tiny little spots, specks, and it's gonna create like all kinds of different directions, right? So and then for the nose, I can start like blocking the forms for the nose here. I can tell you how I do it, which is basically the same brush, this one here, and I just do like the circular motion that I told you guys before. So for the nose, maybe it's a little bit too big. Let me get a little smaller. Smaller like this, and just in circles, just doing everything in circles. Let me just go back here. So I do the center asymmetrical, right? But then to save myself some time, I just do symmetrically right here. And again, this is just a first step, right? Don't imagine that anything here is kind of like, oh, that's the way it's gonna look in the renders. All those things gonna have like multiple layers of pimples and maybe micro scars and little, all kinds of stuff, you know, we can add to actually add some natural form to it. But this is just like to break up the surface. So instead of like when you render your model next time with your displacement map, instead of having that plastic surface to look at, you're gonna have a much more interesting surface that's gonna look more diffuse, right? Because that's what happens in real life. If you have like an area that's very smooth looking, it's because you don't have a lot of micro breakup, right? And if you have an area that looks more diffuse when it comes to specular, it's because the surface is being broken down into tiny little pieces, right? So for example, like around the nose here, I'm gonna have to pick my battles. I'm gonna add this like micro surface detail here, but then when it gets to the tip in here, I might remove some of them and just leave the blackheads in there to break up. And so that way I can get a little bit more of a shiny nose, right? The tip of the nose is normally a little bit more shiny. But around those areas here, I'm just gonna keep breaking it up with the same brush in circles every time. And then I can actually start adding direction as well. For example, like around this area here, I can, instead of like doing circles, I can just bring more of a direction like this, right? So it kind of like starts to fade from one form to another. And then you can actually add a little variation in size as well. So for example, I made it a little bigger. So I can just do another pass here with a little bit bigger like that. So for bigger wrinkles. And then this is the same kind of treatment I'm gonna be using in areas like around here, you know, it's like the top of the eyelid, and even add some right now, a little bigger circles. And at the end, we're gonna see like, we're gonna be using like a few brushes actually to create the whole thing. It's just kind of like working smart, you know, it's like I'm trying to merge and add like the right brush to the right spot, and then blending those areas, creating like nice areas of blending. That's gonna help a lot as well. So around here, when it comes to this area here, we're gonna be talking more about wrinkles tomorrow. But when you get to this area here, what you have is normally like micro wrinkles happening. Let's just get to the stroke, lazy mouse again, and let's do a Z sub. So those guys gonna be very thin. I'm just gonna cut like, I try to go like zigzag, go to one side and then start the other side and then come back. And then I'm gonna start like blending them to the sides in there. So this area you get like tiny little micro wrinkles in here. And those ones show actually in the renders. It's impressive because the kind of area that you take for granted. But if you have those tiny little guys, you're gonna start seeing like almost like a tiny little stretch happening in there. And then when you get to the side, you can actually turn on your symmetry again. If it's just like micro detail like this, symmetry is not a problem at all. Like for pores and micro wrinkles, not a problem at all. Now when you get to the bigger stuff, right? Like the bigger forms, then I would not recommend using anything symmetrical because it's not gonna look realistic at all. But if it's just the micro stuff, pores, micro wrinkles, totally fine. You can get away with a lot and get a lot done. So, you know, it's like just like different ideas here for you guys to go over. Tomorrow we're going to be sculpting the eye bags, so that's a part that I like a lot. But I'm going to sculpt probably tonight after the class. I'm going to finish this area with the pores done manually, and then probably going to help myself a little bit with this array here. Maybe some here, and then the rest of the face. Maybe around here, a little bit of those, like the automatic, like with the array, just to speed up the process. But around this area here is going to be manual. So it's going to be basically a little bit more of the same. What I try to do with those classes, I try to give you all the tools to do exactly what I'm doing. And then if it's after the class, what I'm going to be doing is basically like repeating the same process. What I did this weekend that was different was actually adding the eyes. That we didn't talk about the eyes, but it was just because I wanted to see the model with the eyes, because I mean, like, it's I have to get her likeness correct, otherwise she's going to divorce me. It's not a promise, but I have this in the back of my head. I'm very afraid. So I'm trying to get it to look like her. And then the poly paint was just like a very basic poly paint. I started with the skin from, I think it was from Ray Harryhausen, and I just like smoothed it out and just made like a very plain color, and just painted some lipstick in there. But other than that, I didn't touch the model that much. Oh, likeness, obviously. I was poking around for like 4 days. Actually, yesterday, 3 days, 4 days with today. Before the class started, I actually poked her likeness a little bit more as well.
Hey,
And that's,
Chris,
yes.
I have a quick question about working with the pores and also like the primary and secondary shapes.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing the pore work,
Mm-hmm.
and then you say, you know, you can go back and keep working on like maybe your primary shapes if you're still not there, or maybe some secondary shapes.
Yeah.
Are you just sculpting at a much lower subdivision level? You know, obviously you're out of HD mode at that point. You're going down to like maybe sub D, sub 2.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Because
sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, because all those pores I'm sculpting in HD here, they're not going to affect those levels at all. If you just like go and just like move bigger forms and sculpt like at level 1 or 2 in there, you should be totally fine.
So you're not really in danger of like destroying your pore data at like 2 or 3 or anything like that?
Not at all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, no.
Very helpful.
Yeah, man, because that would kill me. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, no worries at all. For example, like if I want to create like a bunch of concept art in 3D, for example, normally what I do, I sculpt one model with a very nice detail like this. And then if I have like variations, for example, like a bunch of creatures, they're all like the same species, for example, but they all share the same skin. So I can just like do a pass like this, have a skin for all of them. And then I just save the major wrinkles, for example, to create like the distinction between them. Obviously, the main primary form, secondary form is going to change, but also like the specific wrinkles as well. So I just like save the file around here, right? Like after I have just the base of the skin, and then from that point on, I can just like go to town with the with the forms in the primary and the secondary forms, and you still have all this awesome detail waiting for me, at the higher levels.
Very cool. So do you ever like at a certain point export your like maybe your earlier meshes out just in case you want to go back and re-import maybe some shapes back in? Or do you ever work in like subtools, or not really? You just kind of go to town?
I would say like sometimes the likeness gets lost, right? Sometimes you're working on it, and then you have like between iterations, there is one that you're like, man, it was looking better before. But every time I save my models, I have like a different number in front of it. So like I do by iteration. For example, if I save this file here, I'm going to name like blah, blah, blah 11. And then every single map that I'm going to export out of it is going to be called 11 as well. And so everything follows that iteration, So if I need to go back, although I don't have like a name that actually tells me exactly what I'm doing, at least I have the date, So if I posted something like 3 days ago, I can just look at that iteration, what I used to render, and then I can go back to it. And then obviously I can just go back and re-import and blend things up. but I try to always move forward. You know, it's like, so if I get in trouble with something of the likeness that I got lost at some point, instead of like going back to a previous model, I just like, you know what, I think I can do it, and I can do better than last time. So I think I can just move on. It's just, I keep going forward.
Gotcha. Thanks.
No problem. Same with lighting, man. I'm such a mess, you know. It's like instead of like having a lighting, I was like, oh man, this lighting is cool. Let's stick with it because it's working. I keep pushing, you know. It's like the lighting that worked for one model. Sometimes I'm like, you know what, I can try something different, and it might get better. So I keep pushing, and sometimes it doesn't get better. So sometimes I go back and then re-import the lighting. The lighting is one that I actually reuse. But most of the time, it's just like, you know what? I gotta try with a different HDRI, just mix with some area lights in here, and it's gonna look better, or at least like it's an attempt, you know, to look better. You see, like I'm yapping a lot here, and things got done in there. You know, there's a lot of little detail we can use, and obviously have like little pimples and things like that. Being very careful. So the divorce is always lingering, man. So you have to be very careful with what I'm doing here. Playing with fire, like people are posting on my Instagram, like you're playing with fire. Don't ever model your wife or girlfriend.
Chris,
Yes.
so referring to the pores, you sculpt almost the whole head with the same brush, don't you?
Yes. Pretty much the same.
And for example, for the forehead?
For the what?
For the forehead or the nose itself?
Yeah.
Do you use another kind of pores?
It's actually, it's a very similar technique. So for example, for the nose, right? If I have something like this, I'm gonna probably start adding some pores, but instead of like adding them with this detail around, I'm probably going to go to a lower resolution. For example, like even HD, I can go back and forth. Like I can go to, in this case here, my lowest resolution is 433. So if I go one more around here, if I add a pore in here, for example, it's going to just add, oh, I cannot do symmetrically. It's just going to add a little depth in there, but without making anything too defined, even a little higher, maybe like see subdivision level, like this. So I can get the pores in there, but without having too much of the detail, you know. In this case here, obviously, I'm going to be using much more of, let me just smooth this one out a little bit. Got a little too deep. And that's another thing you can do, you know, it's like you can go back and forth in resolution and just smooth things out a little bit. But in this case here, I think for the nose, the best one for me would be using that pimple brush that I have, that I show you guys. So in this case here, I probably would do something more like this, you know. Let's see, maybe less intensity perhaps, because her skin is softer. Let's see, 20. Yeah, things like that, you know, it's like add little pimples here and there. But yeah, I mean, like the pores, it's gonna be always a combination. Tomorrow when I start blending, this area here with the detail are gonna be sculpting for the wrinkles in the eye bags. You're gonna see how I blend those things, you know, it's like, it's almost like, it's a similar technique I use here. So it goes like from pore to micro wrinkles and then blends it to something totally different. And then sometimes you just like play with the intensity of the brush itself. So if I have like 34, that's the intensity I'm using for everything here. When I get to an area like this, I can start going lower. So for example, 27, and just like placing some of them like that. Actually, I'm not using symmetry. Let me turn on the symmetry now. So we start blending, basically like it becomes like a blend between wrinkles and pores, and then it completely disappears at some point. Something around there.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Another question for you. So say you're working on like that area around the nose and maybe you mucked it up. Maybe you just kind of like push the pores in a little bit too hard, and you kind of gotta go back a little bit. Like, do you just typically smooth it out, or do you do anything else to it to kind of go back a little bit?
Yeah, like in the past, I would smooth it out and then just resculpt it. But then now with this little trick that we saved the morph target, right? You can just go back with your morph, and then let's like lift some of this area here. You can use like a very low intensity for the morph, like 6, and then I can just bring this part back. You know, just blend it back. That's basically what I'm doing these days. I mean, like after Omid mentioned that like in the forum last time, I was just like, yeah, that's a great idea. So that's
Very
what
cool.
that's what I started using, you know.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a shame we don't have layers, right? Like it would be nice if the layers are fully working, but this is actually really helpful. Better than nothing. So yeah, let's you know, erase this area here because I think the pores got a little bit too small, and I'm gonna just redo it. Let's do a morph, sorry. I'm just gonna eliminate this area altogether. So let's try this. Pretty easy. And then let's switch back to the multi-pores, this one. Let's try to get the size a little bit bigger this time, especially here. So let's try. Just comparing to what I see in the face in there. Something around there should be good. And then again, we can always blend it back, right? So I'm gonna try to match the circle around the sizing here, just as a reference point, just a little bit bigger, so I can actually go and transfer and I know where to stop. Got a little bit bigger. I think it's because my circle is not a perfect circle. It's gonna get a little bit closer. Yeah, this should work. Then around here, same. You have to be careful, like you're facing the normal at all times, otherwise it starts like stretching and looking weird, kind of sideways. Make sure you're just like rotating, spinning around your model. Just make sure you have that. See the size, a little bigger. Just trying to be consistent with the size of those brushes, you know, otherwise start looking like, you know, it's like you make one like this and then the one like that, right? Doesn't look very correct. So trying to be consistent with the sizes. That's why I'm kind of using this little reference size here, right? So basically, if I compare it, I know I can actually fit it pretty much around here. Maybe a little bit more to the center.
Chris?
Yes.
Have you tried the dynamic brush with this technique?
No.
Work? Do you think it will work? To keep the size like constant?
The dynamic brush. Oh, look, I left one left over there. No, I never tried.
Okay.
Would be a good test to do, actually. I'm actually open to anything, man. There's like techniques I learned here in the past 2 classes, actually. Some of the students came up with, and I was like, oh, sure, let's use it. Like the morph one, for example, you know, it's like it's one that I wasn't using before. I was like, oh, that sounds great. Let's do it. Like I said, like all those things have plenty of room, you know, it's like to improve, and we can build up on whatever was there, you know. It's like I'm totally up for it. Let's do this one here. So this one here, I'm not going to be able to actually go all the way, but I can actually do around here. And this is kind of like an area that actually can get away with murder. So let's try 27 for intensity. Let's see if we get enough intensity. Maybe a little bit deeper than that, like 30 something. 34. It's good enough. So now let's see, a little higher. Yeah, maybe too high. 30 something. Yeah, just filling it up. And again, like it doesn't need to be like a perfect distance between them. Sometimes I just go randomly and pick one spot and just add one pore right there just to break up. If I see there's an area that's a little bit emptier than others, just add one of them, you know. So I'm just gonna fill up this gap here so we can actually complete this. And it goes fast actually. Once you have those, the big circles filling up the whole area, just to fill up those gaps is super fast, you know. You just go there and just add a couple of them. And again, like the way I'm placing the pores, you're not seeing there, but I'm actually drawing in different directions, right? So I go like up to down, and then side to other side, and then the opposite, trying to add some variation when I place them. But it's kind of like, it's a very, you know, it's like, it's a matter of like exercising how you do it, because it's overkill as well. You know, it's like if you do all of them in the same direction, most likely you're not going to notice because of, you know, the subsurface and all that stuff. But I like to, you know, any little layer of randomness that you can add can help, you know, it's like to make things more organic. If you do this like in every single step, you know, it's like trying to add some of your own touch to everything. At the end, the result's going to look organic. That's why I try to avoid like using like a, you know, it's like a roll brush or something like that, because that's the kind of effect I'm not going to get. In this area here, by the way, I should be using the symmetry, because those areas are symmetrical, but I missed that. Let's see, around here I can use symmetry and then help myself out instead of like sculpting a lot by hand. Yeah, in the pore, basically like before you go crazy, like sculpting a lot of stuff and then, until you figure it out, like, oh man, this is not working, I would say like do tests, you know, start with a small area, look from a distance, look how much variation you can add. For example, like, yeah, you see, like I'm not doing like a perfect placement. It's always kind of like all over the place. Some of them are closer than the others, right? But something that has to, the main point is like, if you look at my structure here, you see those tiny little rays in here, right? They go and they try to connect to the next one, to the neighbor. So they have like, the placement has to be close enough. If you do something like this and then something like this, that's not connecting, right? There's a big gap in between them. But you have to have a little overlap when you place your pores. So if you have a distance that actually they barely connect when you place them, that's basically like it's a good, it's a successful distance you're using right there. But then obviously in the context of the whole face, what's the distance, right? So that's why you kind of like, instead of like getting too much like I'm doing right now, like getting too close to that, sometimes you go a little bit further and then restudy it again. So you can actually refresh it, you know, and then see what the distance is. Again, like don't go too crazy with adding a lot of pores if you know, it's like without testing it first. Testing the form of your pore, for example, if it's not working very nicely, just like go back, resculpt it, capture it again as a brush, and then do it again until you're happy with it, you know. Test with a little arrays first, and don't rush, you know. It's like, this is very important. I mean, like this class here, I think the misunderstanding is that you guys have to follow along everything I'm doing. And I'm gonna tell you, like starting this week, I'm gonna get pretty fast because I can crank this stuff like quite fast, and because I already did a bunch of them using the same technique, and you guys are pretty fresh to it, you know. So if you start adding pressure to yourselves to follow up and try to do it at the same speed that I'm doing, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be impossible, because you guys are awesome and some of you guys are really fast, but it might be a lot of fuel for disappointment, you know. So don't force. Just like if you do this slowly first until you really capture like the essence of it, like in terms of the distance and stuff like that, then it's going to be much easier to do fast later, you know, instead of like just trying to speed up right now. It's kind of like learning guitar, right? You're not going to start as a shredder. You're going to start like really going note by note and learning, you know, it's like how they behave like in the context. And then from that point on, you build up speed as you go, right? With experience comes the speed, and not the opposite. I'm just like doing fast because I did this a lot of times, basically. And every single class I sculpt more of it. So that's how. But yeah, don't force yourselves. Challenge yourself is very important, and I really appreciate you guys gonna do an amazing job. And I can tell, you know, it's like a lot of you guys are already doing an amazing job. But it's fuel for frustration, like the spores. In the previous classes, some of my students and myself, I had to redo my pores. Like for Ray, actually I redid like 3 times his cheeks because I just could not get it right. And it turns out that the fault wasn't the pores itself themselves. It was actually the nature of his skin. You know, it's like his skin is different because it's kind of like an older guy. So basically, like his skin needed to be a little bit more stretched and paper thin. And that means I had to eliminate the pores mostly, and then just like resculpt with the very like subtle ones, but mostly wrinkles more than pores themselves. So you see, like for how much I yapped the whole time, I got like a lot done in the chin, basically using a little array that I encourage you guys to create. If you want to go further and create like some stretched versions of them, right? Like just sculpt with a little bit more like an oval shape instead of like a round shape. And some of them pretty much like stretched all the way. You can actually create a little set of skin stuff, you know? And again, like you can go to Palomita's Google Drive, and that one has a ton of different skin types in there. And you can actually try to emulate some different ones, you know? Like for stretching and stuff like that. Let's see what time this is. Oh, it's 11:30. We're kind of right on the dot. You guys have any other question? Before we go, I let you go, and I'm gonna be not recording. It's all recorded, but I have to process those videos. But meanwhile, while we process, I'm gonna be just doing the same, just sculpting. But look at that, we got a chin. And the chin, tomorrow we're gonna be sculpting like wrinkles and stuff. So I'm gonna show you what happens with the chin, because we have like lots of micro detail that happens kind of like in a crisscross version of it. So basically like there's a line that goes around the kind of like the silhouette of the face. So basically like you're gonna get all those micro details that way. And then there's some of them coming towards like you know, it's like almost like around the mouth like that. So they kind of start crossing around here, and they're just like micro detail. The pore is going to be the same, just the micro detail at the top is going to be looking different. So for today, we've managed to do those areas, and then probably going to be able to complete this area around here all the way to that part before I go to sleep tonight. And then we deal with like lips and the eye bags tomorrow. All right, guys. Thank you so much again. I hope you learned a few things today. If it's still a little bit you know, it's like difficult, rewatch the video, because I think it's you know, it's like pretty much like broken down in there. But if you still have some questions, I don't mind like doing like little tutorials every time. You know, it's like for the pores, I remember like I resculpted maybe like 2 or 3 times in the past class, just for people to actually get what I was saying. So just let me know, you know, it's like if you have any problems, I'm here to help you guys. So thank you so much, and I see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, and I'm gonna be commenting on the group as well, because I kind of bypassed a few ones, but I'm gonna be commenting again. And you should be waiting for an email, probably coming on Wednesday. So I'm gonna be announcing both in the group and also in the email, like the meeting number and everything, so you guys can check it out. Sweet. See ya.